Welcome back to our extra special. And today's extra special, as we explore the financial workings of Nigeria, especially the budget of all 36 states in Nigeria through a comprehensive analysis provided by the civic tech organization BudgIT. BudgIT is renowned for promoting transparency and accountability in public finance by making budgetary information more accessible to citizens.
Now, the latest report sheds light on how states allocate and spend their resources, revealing trends, inefficiencies, and opportunities for improvement. Now, to help us understand the findings and implications of this analysis, we have with us the country Director of BudgIT, Oluseun Onigbinde, and we would like to say welcome to the program, Mr. Onigbinde.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Yeah.
It's in a very shaky place. I hope my
It's okay.
We will take it.
Thank you for joining us. We almost didn't get you on, but we're happy that you're here. Thank you.
Let's start with an overview, right? What are the key takeaways from BudgIT's analysis of the budgets of all 36 states in Nigeria?
The budget of states differs. So you get states who have budgets running to trillions of naira, like Lagos, or above 500 billion, like Delta, Akwa Ibom, or you have states that are also below 300 billion, like the Osun, Kebbi, Jigawa states. So you find out that state budgets will definitely, to some extent, reflect their financial capabilities. There's some few trends you will still see, is that some state budgets are highly exaggerated in terms of their revenue. So for example, you see a state with a very, very low IGR, maybe less than 20 billion an IGR, and is now projecting to have a whole lot of IGR within a single year. So a bit of IGR raise is still a bit unrealistic, considering that most IGR collections are in naira, so you don't expect, except you're going to raise rates, you don't expect a significant jump in the IGR. The second thing you will see is a whole lot of deficits. If you take a look at a state like Abia or Anambra State, you see that the size of deficit is significantly high. A lot of states are also projecting to borrow. And I think that's occasioned by two things. One is that most of the states expect that more money will come to their pockets because of the devaluation of the currency and the payment that will be made at the federal level. So they are anticipating to spend along that line. The second thing is also some of the states where they have new governors, maybe governors are in their first year. There's a lot of excitement to show maybe impact or to show deliverables to the people. So they are significantly trying to borrow much more than necessary.
Okay, it was very interesting that you
so those are the major trends you will see. Go ahead.
All right, it was very interesting that you talked about the different states and how they compare. But I want to ask, in terms of revenue generation now, which states are leading and what they're doing differently if you compare them to each other?
Yeah, in terms of revenue generation, we know the numbers: Lagos, Ogun, Delta, Rivers, Bayelsa, Oyo. I mean, those are like major states. Akwa Ibom. So state leading one is like in Lagos, where you have a significant revenue coming from the high GR. Lagos State had over 600 billion in high GR last year. They are projecting around 1.2 trillion naira this year. So it's going to see how they want to move from around 650 billion, to 1.2 trillion naira. You have a state like Ogun State, also at Nigeria, around 110 billion naira, projecting around 240 billion naira. So then you have the oil producing states that get significant amount of money from the derivation funds. So like Bayelsa, Delta, Rivers, and Akwa Ibom. Those four states alone get around over 2 trillion naira annually from the federal purse, in terms of revenue. So they're also projecting high as possible. So that is the situation where we are. A lot of states are projecting high revenue. So that's supposed to now redefine how we see the landscape. But a lot of states also don't have a lot of revenue. Let's forget that this is a budget, it's a projection. So you can write whatever you like in the budget, like the previous governor of Cross River used to do. But the reality will show up at the end of 12 months.
Now, can you tell us which states are performing least in terms of revenue?
In terms of least now revenue, most of the states you find is Jigawa, Gombe, Bauchi, Ebonyi, also maybe Zamfara. Those are the states with the least level of revenue. Then you go to the mid-tier because Jigawa, for example, here is projecting, if you as well, they're going to be also 99 billion, IGR of 23 billion. Jigawa is doing an IGR of 50 billion. That doesn't sound highly realistic. But a lot of people are projecting also high government share of FAC. But as you can see, Jigawa is projecting a deficit. That means it's trying to borrow 122 billion. So the significant trend we see in the state is that some of them, the amount they are projecting in terms of deficit borrowing is relatively too high compared to their revenue. And those are the states with the least revenue. Ekiti also has a very poor level of revenue, especially the fact that they have a small population. They don't get a lot for fact relative to others. Yeah.
Let's talk about allocations, right? And especially those allocations that would impact public services and critical sectors like education and healthcare, which is very important, especially healthcare and education. Which states are investing more in terms of allocations, and which states are least investing in critical sectors?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to critical sectors, it's a different game entirely. But what you see is that most states, the significant allocation goes to works and transport ministries. We still, our data still shows that we still have few states investing in health and education. An average state invests less than 10% of its budget on health and education combined together. So there's still a huge challenge in that regard, because you want to know that the bedrock of primary and secondary health education system is founded on the state. So it's still very, very sad that a lot of states are not investing, but most people, you still see a lot of significant investment. Two places. One is works and transport, and also a lot of states buying cars, because maybe possibly this is their first full budget. There's so many money investments in buying cars and buying a whole lot of things to support government in terms of overheads. It's a bit worrisome and troublesome. And I think we're coming with a report very soon to show how much states are spending on cars or across over time.
It's very interesting that you mentioned Ekiti as one of the least performing, but the Ekiti state has always been known as one that invests plenty inside of the education sector. So I'm trying to reconcile that. How come this is so? Aren't they producing anything at all?
I mean, when I mean least performing, I'm talking in terms of revenue, and sometimes you don't have surprises, or you don't have what I would call, you don't have miracles when it comes to revenue. You take it incrementally. You activate levels of productivity for your revenue grows. So shown in that sheet, the IGR is around 22 billion naira per year, over the whole year. So, and I think that's a relatively realistic. Puts them around less than 2 billion naira per month. I think they could be a little bit more ambitious than that. You can see the deficit as high as 50 billion naira. So it's also something to worth watching, in terms of how much IGR they put in there. But I think a lot of states that we believed could do much more better. The Ekiti state is one of them in terms of the revenue projections here. This seems a little bit low, but they are also relatively invested in education. But because if you want to look at investment in education health, you need to look at it from the percentage level. It's about how big your quote is, what you cut into size. So you cannot look at it in absolute figure levels. So there's some states like Delta that still under-investing in education significantly. A lot of spending is on roads and on infrastructure. So it's so important that states also start paying attention to things like this.
And speaking about states, right, and the efficiencies of them, let's take a look at states that are excelling in terms of, budgetary efficiency and innovation, or innovative, financial management when it comes to their practices, best practices. What states have been doing so well in the past, and who do you anticipate would be more efficient in their budget spending?
I think a few states have done well. There's the World Bank CIFTAS program that allows states to publish their documents, and they get incentive on the basis of that. And you see states come with a help. To be an example is a state like Jigawa has been, a cut above the rest. You have also Edo, you also have Anambra, you also have even Oyo, states that have even Kaduna, part-time. The challenge of some of these states also is that the type of debt that you take, it also matters, because A lot of states that have heavily taken external debt in recent times, have faced the brunt. For example, you go borrow at 400 billion naira, at 400 naira to a dollar, then you're not paying back at 1,500 naira to a dollar. It's a huge mismatch in some sort of. That's why we've always advised states to be very, very careful about taking external debts, because it could have significant impact on their fiscal sheet. And I think Kaduna is a state to watch out for in terms of what exactly their fiscal ability would be to be able to provide for states. You also have states like Abia that we are currently cautioning. If you look at Abia's finances, you will see that Abia's budgets are also, the deficit size is also significant, also too high, as much as possible.
Mm. And when it comes to recurring issues that you just mentioned, one of them is high recurrent expenditure. Have you looked at the data, and with your analysis and with the intelligence that you have at your fingertips, what strategies can you, prefer to these states, to adopt to reduce this and ensure more funds are available, when it comes to capital projects?
I mean, I don't think recurrent expenditure is that bad. Because if you have a capital project to have a recurrent component, what I mean is, if you build a school, you will have to pay teachers. If you build an hospital, you will have to pay doctors. So paying doctors, paying teachers, that's part of the recurrent expenditure. It's good to have a mix so that you don't use all the money to spend on issues of today, but it's also important that we also want fund efficiency, put monies where they are most efficient. Secondly is the kind of capital expenditure, because if you buy a car or you buy a bus or you go pay for a jet, and say this is a state jet, it's also capital expenditure. So which kind of capital expenditure? We should be faced significant, like, what is the best use of this resource for the public? And I think if we evidently invest much more in that kind of thinking, we'll get the result. A lot of states have huge recurrent expenditure that are not necessary. For example, in Bayelsa, the Delta, what we have seen is that most oil producing states, because of the size of funds they receive, they've also bloated their recurrent expenditure over time. And that's really not helpful. When you look at Bayelsa now, a recurrent expenditure of 224 billion, or Delta, a recurrent expenditure of 316 billion, even though you say they plan to spend more on CapEx, but it doesn't still mean that recurrent is not just too high. For instance, that can Bayelsa have a recurrent expenditure almost at the same level at Oyo State. You understand what I mean? And those are the challenges you put down there. That a state also should squeeze. You have a small state, you should do less on recurrent expenditure, and so that you can free more funds from capital. Because let's not lie to ourselves. It's a recurrent expenditure that gets more priority. You can't owe salary to workers. You can't owe doctors pensions. You can't owe pensioners. You need to do those obligations. They are statutory obligations you would have to meet. Where the rubber meets the road is on the capital expenditure, because that is where most times you see a whole lot of states are not able to meet the budget performance. So we always advocate, shrink your recurrent expenditure, make it more efficient as much as you can, and make sure that your capital expenditure is for the things that will do things that will impact the people, but that have opportunity to generate future revenues or grow productivity within your states.
So we have so many questions to ask you. This is only the beginning, and I want to merge both fiscal and polity here now. How much influence does polity or political crises have in state budgets? I'm very interested in Kaduna State, and I'm very concerned about Rivers State. So if you could use those two as your samples.
I mean, for Rivers State, we know the controversy that it was asked to represent the state budget all over again to the. So I don't know which House of Assembly we hold to now. The courts are yet to fully decide. I think they were the last state to publish their budget. It seems like the routine budget that they publish, their IGR numbers looks a little bit higher, but it still seems within the same range. I think they understated somehow their FAC allocation. If you compare them to like an Akwa, even that hopes that it would get far, far more from the federal allocation. But you also have to respect that they're one of the few states in the Niger that I think they've tried to rationalize their revenue, their recurrent expenditure a bit. For Kaduna, their IGR, I'm watching to see what that is. The last governor left the IGR around 50 to 60 billion. And we've always looked at that deeply and say, okay, this is a great way to kick off, but we don't know how the state government wants to double that to 120 billion within a single year. I also know that there's going to be a lot of spending on the on the recurrent payments. So we're also watching how much the debt service cost might rise in the near term. So because also that, like I said, exchange rate devaluation is not in the good side of state. So for me, most of the budget you see here, like the first budget of most new state governors, they are eager to impress. So they are packing a lot of things in the capital expenditure, which means if revenue is not enough, they want to significantly borrow. But we'll see how that will go along the line.
Oluseun, there's been a lot of, when you look at the Governors Forum regarding the proposed minimum wage, the very first number, which was 60 and then 62,000 naira, the governors claimed that they could not pay at state level and would go bankrupt if they attempted to pay. But from the data, right, and from the analysis, do you think that the states can afford to pay this amount of 62,000 naira to state civil servants?
Interesting question there. Let's go.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Number one, I feel some states can pay above 60,000. I believe that some states can pay 60,000. I believe that some states might not be able. First thing to consider is the cost of living within a state. So we have to first be honest about that. Lagos and Zamfara do not carry the same cost of living. The second thing is also to look at the size of the civil service. There's some states like Oyo or even Rivers, legacy states within regions, Enugu, Kano, Kaduna, that carry significant civil service or civil servants. So they also be very clear that the size of the revenue will be critical at the end of the day. I think every state should at least be able to pay 50,000 naira on the minimum.
Okay. So let's now ask, how can states improve their budget transparency? You also just noted that, or from earlier noted that states would often want to impress. But how can they improve their budget transparency and accountability to foster greater public trust and also perhaps practicability or participation?
Yeah, I mean, we've started, we have the State Fiscal Transparency League. There's a table that we always publish every quarter that shows the performance of states relative to transparency and accountability. And we have states like Jigawa, Edo, Anambra at top of the pile. What we keep saying is that that is not a proof of anything. That is not the reality of anything. So we're very, very honest about that. It's not the full answer. Transparency is a huge spectrum. So we're very, very clear around that. So for me, I think that what states need to do is just be honest with themselves. Because you could be transparent about waste. You could be transparent about abuse of public resources. So if I publish the numbers, it does not mean that I'm doing the right thing. It's also very important that states remain very accountable. Understand that public resources are limited, understands that there's also a limited time to deliver the goods of the people, and they need to put everything in the box to ensure that they serve the people properly. Yeah.
Okay, there's this instance that's happening. I don't know if you recall that the Senate resumed plenary, and this was on Thursday, and they extended the capital section of the 2023 supplementary budget. Now, what this has resulted in is that there are 3 budgets running concurrently, one from the Muhammadu Buhari tenure, Bola Ahmed Tinubu's one, and then another one, which is a supplementary one, all to run concurrently. What's your view on this, and how would this affect whether allocation or revenue or participation? I
mean, the budget has also come out to condemn it as well, so we'd like to get your take on this very, very quickly.
Yeah, I mean, it's a shame. Let's be honest with ourselves. It's a huge shame. I've not seen that happen before anywhere. I mean, you have likely going to have 4 budgets running concurrently. I mean, and it's just because it looks like the president tries to get a grip of his monetary policy through the CBN. Well, on the fiscal side of things, that the Ministry of Finance, the resource authorities, and the presidency are supposed to have much more control over. They don't seem to get that right. Look at customs. There's no policy on customs on the exchange rate. It's more like get as much money as we can get from the people. There is no strong fiscal policy on about budget efficiency control. The 2023 budget was riddled with a whole lot of waste and a whole lot of errors. Then you have the supplementary budget that also people said were more about refurbishing the State House, buying vehicles for the First Lady, changing the State House in Marina. That just didn't show a lot of promise when it comes to investing in the people. You have the 2024 budget to correct that. Then you still made the errors. National Assembly member talking around 2.2 trillion naira worth of items in the budget, and the whole budget agencies were doing things outside their mandate. You have a new budget office DG. At least you give him time to advise you on what to do, but you just don't do that. What you were supposed to do is, if you have items in 2023 budget that are not funded, or items that you think you want to continue to fund, then you bring all the items together, then you put that in the 2024 elite supplementary budget. So you have two budgets running. You have the 2024 budget and the supplementary budget. You don't bring back, you don't extend, the shelf life of the budget should not be 2 years. And this is when maybe we need to push back on legislation around the budgeting process. That the budget should stay and remain within the fiscal year. Because what you are creating now is a whole lot of confusion where people can now go back into the 2023 budget, look for items that benefit their own personally and start trying to implement that. I think the National Assembly did this country a great service by not pushing back heavily on that situation. And you find people who came up, who spoke up. Honorable Kingsley Chinda, Honorable Dugua spoke up that this is an anomaly, this is an unprecedented anomaly. But at the end of the day, the National Assembly did not resist. They should have pushed back to the government presidency. If there are outstanding budget items in the 2023 budget that you think should be implemented now, give us a list of them, add them to your supplementary budget, bring it back, and they would approve that for you. Now you say the old blanket 2023 budget, either supplementary or full budget should be implemented. I think that's really, really a terrible practice, and we'll continue to condemn that. We'll make our positions known to government, and we'll tell them that this is just an unfortunate spectacle. Yeah.
Well, Mr. Oluseun Onigbinde, it's been wonderful having you here, just, giving us very in-depth analysis on the state's budget. It's very, very amazing. And
it's very confusing.
Very confusing as well.
Because not everybody knows about what's happening.
Yeah.
You're just giving us some very good highlights on the detail. And
also many thanks to, and kudos to the entire team at BudgIT to always continue to stay on top of it and give the data and show transparency to the people of Nigeria and hold power accountable. I think it's very important. Once again, many thanks. I know you have a flight to catch, so we'll let you go now.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much. It's a pleasure being here today. Thank you.
Thank you.